Hello, everyone, and welcome to Officially Unofficial TV. The topic of conversation today is eating disorders. We're going to be talking about what eating disorders are, why eating disorders happen, and we're also going to talk about the signs of eating disorders, as well as provide you with coping skills so that it can aid you in your recovery and healing. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Ana Gil, and I am a headshots photographer and live and remote video producer. And what this means is that I can produce shows just as this one that you're seeing right now on location as well as remotely. So if you would like to learn more about that, you can send me an email at officiallyunofficialtv@gmail.com. That is officiallyunofficialtv@gmail.com. Today, whether you're watching the replay or live, you can ask us your questions by just putting a cue in front of us so that we can know that it is a question. Now we can go and start with our guest, Tracy Mergler. Tracy. How are you?
Good.
Thank you.
Good to be back here.
I know, right? Thank you. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So Tracy, for those who are not familiar with the effort and the movement that you're putting together here on Central New York, can you please share your expertise on the mental health area?
That is quite the opening. Okay, I will see if I can do that justice. Okay, so for me, my battle with the mental health world, I made a few realizations, is that mental health is tied in a lot of shame and a lot of isolation. And so I said, okay, I can't be the only one that's struggling in this world. So what if we flip the lens and we make a few realizations that everyone has mental health and everyone is struggling with it at some point in their life, and that it's actually a community-wide issue, that we heal in community, that we heal through connection, and that it's actually not shameful at all. Yet those are the beliefs that are ingrained in us from early on, right? So I have taken on this mission here in Syracuse to completely change the lens on mental health and make it empowering and about connection and community, and really celebrating this process instead of keeping it in the dark. So that is my hope moving forward.
And that is going to happen because the movement and everything that you're doing for the community is definitely, I mean, I'm so proud to have you here, and I'm pretty sure
Oh,
I'm pretty sure everyone does. So yes. Now,
you're so,
Tracy.
you're so sweet.
Aw, and so are you. Look at us just blushing on each other. I mean,
I
like,
know, we literally are.
so remember, everyone, that if you have a question for us as we go through, please feel free to write it in the comment, just adding Q in front of it. And if it is a comment, just write your comment and we will check it out. So, Tracy, let's talk about what eating disorders are.
Okay. Eating disorders. There's two topics that I want to address today on our channel here. And we have eating disorders and we have disordered eating. So
Mm,
if we're talking primarily about eating disorders, there are probably about 8 different identified eating disorders, but there are 4 that most people know about, that we will start to tackle in a minute. And then if we talk about disordered eating, we're talking about using food maladaptively. And honestly, our society is based in this idea of disordered eating. I mean, it comes down to diets, comes down to restrictive food choices, it comes down to excessive exercise, going past the point where your body says, okay, enough, like going past that point. And it's so ingrained in us at this point, and we are so disconnected from our bodies, that it's a way of life for a lot of us.
yeah.
So I'm hoping we can start to kind of identify the 2 areas
Mm-hmm.
today,
Mm-hmm.
so people can start to identify that in their own lives as well.
Yeah. And it is true. It is so ingrained in us. And then there's a new diet every minute. I mean, they say that the diet in food industry are one of the most lucrative, right? In our country and actually in the world, because everywhere, there's a new diet. Oh, there's this new diet restriction, of what you knew was true back then now is not. And now you have to learn a new way of eating. And as you mentioned before, behind the scenes, that we forget to listen to our own bodies because we trust the experts.
Yes, we put so much of our power into other people,
Mm-hmm.
when what really, you're the one, it's your body, it's your
Mm-hmm.
body, and everybody's deals with food and exercise differently, but we've gotten so disconnected from feeling that we trust other people, and we want a quick fix. We want
Mm-hmm.
a diet that's going to take the pounds off quick. We want a pill. We want something quick and easy, because that's how our lifestyle has developed. That
Mm-hmm.
um, if you want lasting results, it means you have to make big changes. And a lot of people aren't ready to do that. So
Right.
give me a pill, give me a diet,
Mm-hmm.
give me an easy exercise routine to follow, and I'm in,
Right.
right?
Right.
But it doesn't work.
It doesn't. It doesn't. And that's why one new diet keeps popping up every second, it seems like, because it just doesn't work. And like, oh no, fasting. Now fasting. Yeah, fasting might work, but it's not sustainable. It's not something that you can, it's not a way of living, right? You can do it for a specific amount of time if it is religiously or something like that, right? Okay,
Right.
but not as a mode of losing weight. You know what I mean? Like, again, these are our opinions, right? This is our opinions, and this is what we believe and what we have seen. It just
Yes. But it is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
even
Billion-dollar industry. So between diet pills and plastic surgery and anything that transforms your body.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're going to learn today is it actually isn't about your body at all.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't about the food, and it isn't about your body. It's all about what you're internally feeling and how you're processing your pain. But it's easier. It's
Mm-hmm.
easier to adapt our body and focus on a gym routine and the things we can control.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why food becomes one of the main maladaptive options out there for people
Yeah.
that are
The one I was
processing
right,
their
right.
pain. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And another thing actually, I believe I read this on your page. Another thing was it was a comment from somebody else, right? It says like, okay, so people it is a general, because everyone I want to say wants to be thin, right? We all want to be thin. We all want to have like this. We want to be thin. We want to have big behinds. We want to have big everything, right? But small waist, all of that stuff, right? So it seems like if you are skinny, you might not have a disorder, or if you want to gain weight, right? Is not, you don't have a disorder because you want to gain weight. You don't want to lose it. So there are two sides of eating disorders here, right? Because it could be right, and then we
Yes.
have to be cognizant of both of them. They're both mentally, because that's what it comes down to, right? Mental, what is going in our in our minds, right? That is pushing us to take these behaviors.
Extreme behaviors.
Yeah.
It's actually not about weight or size at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you see extreme body weights. And that's what they say, there's no size for an eating disorder. There's no look for an eating disorder, because it affects all of us. And so one of the main comments, which is a massive trigger for somebody in recovery, is you don't look like you have an eating disorder. And you're like, okay. So eating disorders are very, very competitive. So for someone that's in recovery, I'm like, okay, then I'll start to look. Then that's a challenge for me. Then I will start to look like I have an eating disorder. But yeah, eating disorders affect everyone, regardless of weight and size and height and gender and religion and you name it. It affects all of us, because what it is, it's a way to process emotions. So it has nothing to do about the outside package of your body, right? It is providing a purpose internally. And I don't think we realized that for the longest of times. And so the way eating disorders were treated was that it was about the food and it was about weight. And now we're realizing it's just like every other addiction, and it's a way not to feel. It's a way to numb out what's going on inside, because you can control your external environment, then you can control your internal environment.
Let's go over the eating disorder, the most common types of eating disorders, right? So how about we start right here, right? So we're gonna go with the first one.
Okay. Yes. So anorexia nervosa is the first one. That's the one that probably everyone heard of first. It was big in you think of 90s, our models, the very stick thin. And this is restriction. But what you need to realize with all disorders is that you can only restrict so long before binging occurs. And so it looks different for everyone. And that's what I want to blanket across the board with these eating disorders. I have had each one of these disorders at one point in my lifetime. So someone isn't clear cut, you're anorexic, you have binge eating disorder. Like, it isn't clear cut. You dabble in all of them, because like I said, they're serving a purpose. So just know that it's very hard to label somebody with one of these disorders, because we tend to use whatever works in the situation, and we'll dip our toe into anything. So anorexia, that's the restriction. So it's really, it can be paired with exercise. It can be paired with laxatives. It can be paired with other eating disorder modalities, but it's primarily eating a very small number of calories a day. And with that, you get a very um, controlled environment. So you might see your loved ones writing down numbers, what they eat. They tend to track it all and make sure that they're so what goes in comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so people who have been diagnosed with anorexia tend to have a thinner body frame. Um, and so that's the disorder that most people know.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting that you mentioned that that was a '90s disorder because I remember, um, this wasn't in the '90s though. Actually, the movie The
It, earlier,
Carpenters, right? The Carpenters,
yes,
the movie,
the
right?
70s, the
Yeah, the
80s,
'70s, right?
yes.
But it really came out, I guess, in the '90s, right? That's when we really saw it. But that movie with the Carpenters, it brought awareness to it and
Yes.
how horrible of pressure we have as women, and then couple that as being an actress, being in the Hollywood and stuff like that. So that's even worse. And those were the examples of what we were growing up. We were looking at that, right?
Well, and yes, and that's where, so for a lot of us that are around this age, our parents grew up around this, like
Mm-hmm.
were having us around this time, right? So a lot of people that have had eating disorders, it goes through the generational line. So it's things you picked up maybe from a loved one, from a mom, from a dad, from an aunt, from an uncle, but that was ingrained in society at that point. You think about that, that's what those women grew up, those men and women grew up watching. And
Mm-hmm.
so um as you part of recovery from eating disorder is really, or from an eating disorder, is tracing where this all sort of began. And um it's ingrained into our society,
Mm-hmm.
which comes out in all different ways.
Oof.
All right, bulimia. So bulimia is the consumption of food, and then getting rid of it somehow. So for most people, it's throwing up your food after a meal. So it's eating and then throwing up. It could be over exercising. It could be laxative use. Any way to get rid of what you've just eaten. So people diagnosed with bulimia, I hate to say that they don't tend to have the very thin frame, because they can. They absolutely can. It's hard to look at anybody and know what type of eating disorder they have, like I
Mm-hmm.
said. So I don't even want to bring that up, because it's a big trigger for people in recovery too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they don't look like they have a disorder. So, but yeah, this 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 has different warning signs, and because the individual is throwing up so much, that you see different things with their skin, calluses on their hands. Typically, you'll notice more bathroom use. You'll notice food disappearing a lot more. So there's different warning signs, which we'll get into for
Mm-hmm.
bulimia. But yes, it's the consuming and then getting rid of. Is
Yeah, and that is, oof. Like, I mean, it's tough. It's tough that these things exist. I mean, it's so tough, but then at the same time, there are ways to heal from it. There are tons of ways to heal from it, and the number one is, you wanting to do it, and then the number two is seek help from a professional, right? A therapist
absolutely
who specializes in eating disorders, especially those. And so there is recovery, but that getting there, just like you mentioned, first it starts with us trusting, with us trusting our, and our parents, right? Our parents may think that they're doing the right thing, but they're just teaching us what they learned.
right, which isn't on them, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what they knew.
Yeah.
But I think that's why the warning signs are so important, because
Mm-hmm.
the earlier you address this, the better chances of recovery are. So it's and now when you look at, like, you'll look at this, you'll see it. You'll see
Mm-hmm.
it. I mean, the way our society is right now, our numbers are off the charts, because our world is out of control. And so
Mm-hmm.
eating disorders is a way of controlling your exterior your environment, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing a rise in all eating disorders.
Man.
So
Yeah, but then again, okay, for those who are listening, right? There's like you mentioned,
yes,
Tracy, you have experienced one form and another, all of them, right?
yeah,
we all have, and it's because I mean, I want to say, and I don't want to generalize, right? But I want to say, as a woman, we probably had one of them.
oh yeah. At one point,
Mm-hmm.
using food as a way, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we've spoke about this. This is what initially brought this conversation is because I put a post out there that
Mm-hmm.
as as children, we aren't taught, we're getting better with this, but we
Mm-hmm.
aren't taught how to feel and express our emotions, right? So, our easiest and quickest modality as a child is food, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, food has this way of comforting
Mm-hmm.
or of um, whatever it provides this safety. And as children, it's usually the only thing we can get our hands on.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've all heard the term emotional eating or comfort eating,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've all done it.
Right.
And that's okay. We
Mm-hmm.
recognize that.
Right.
But it's stopping the cycle before it gets too out of
Right.
control. I
It's
think
like
that's
when it turns into a pattern of behavior, that is when,
yes. When it starts to control you,
yeah.
rather you control it. That's
Mhm.
a big definer for me. When you know that your disordered way of eating is now turned into into an eating disorder is when
Mhm.
it really starts to control you and your
Mhm.
environment. And um yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more, right? Um we talk about that on a later slide for sure. Binge eating. So this is one, and let me say, all of these are wrapped in so much fear and so much shame that a lot of people do these in their home secretively at night. If they live with others, they do it at night. Do it behind closed doors in the bathrooms. There's so much fear or shame tied to eating disorders, which is why I am hoping that this mission starts to unravel some of that because binge eating is a very it carries a lot of shame. Um, it's excessive amounts of calories in a short amount of time, and it doesn't mean that you're get usually with the binge restrict cycle. Like I said in the beginning, one comes without the other, or one comes with the other. So when you are binging, typical behavior is to then restrict for maybe
Mhm.
a day.
Mhm.
Um, but not every time. Some binge eaters then do throw up or use excessive exercise. Um, Everybody tweaks their eating disorder in their own way, but
Mhm.
under the umbrella of binge eating, it's eating a large amount of calories in a short window of time.
Yeah. And just like you said, it's very isolating, right? It's like it's your secret. It's your secret. You can't you have to be um you hide and just like you mentioned in another one, the money disappears. You're spending an enormous amount of money on food, and it's not food for the family, it's food for you, for the emotion that you're trying to drown, right?
Yes. I think that's the problem is that people don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. They just
Hmm.
realize that it feels good and
Hmm.
they need it and it's like a high or and so we're going to talk about that when you can start to identify why you're doing what you're doing. That's how we start to interrupt the cycle.
Hmm.
So it's nothing to be shameful about. We're not
Right.
taught how to do
Right.
this. We're not taught.
Right. Yeah. And that is what it is. I mean, like we identify it, and once we identify it, that's when we can take control of it and say, okay, so this is my life. This is what I'm gonna do. And so we're gonna get into that in a minute. But let's go to the last one, which I'm really interested in because I've never heard of that one. I
Oh,
haven't heard of
yeah.
yeah.
Orthorexia. This is the newer one of the newer ones that have been classified, and this is extreme focus on healthy eating. So
Mm.
your obsession with healthy eating. So you only buy organic products. You focus on the purity of food, the ingredients, the nutritional value. You tend to eliminate certain food groups. You label foods good and bad. Um, you spend a ton of time planning and weighing and food shopping, and your focus becomes all about your food. And this is somewhat okay in today's society, right? Like we are more focused on our food quality, but when it starts to consume hours and hours of your time, it's becoming a control factor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely considered under our umbrella of disordered or eating disorders.
Okay, because when you were describing it first, I'm like, wait, but that sounds good. I mean, like,
Yeah, this
but
is
it is,
good, this is bad.
yeah. So it is when it's taken to the extreme.
Yes, yes. So we have people that are vegan, we have people that are vegetarian, we have people, yes, no, those aren't considered eating disorders. When it's taken to extreme, where you can't really go out to eat, you can't go to functions without, like, you skipped
Mm,
the food on the table at functions and you eat your own food at home. It's when it really, you find extreme safety in your home environment. You can't eat food that other people make because you don't know what's in it. Um,
okay.
it starts to
Okay.
control your life. It absolutely does.
Yeah, I can see. I can see that's kind of like you said, it's a new one. It's
A
kind
new
of
one.
gray still, right? Kind of a little gray. So I guess the
Absolutely.
way to identify it or would be more if, oh no, I'm not going out because I don't know what's there. Which now, like when you say that, it just makes me think of someone who has an allergy, right? Like you have to make sure that you know what's in the food, all of that.
Right.
So that's acceptable because it's an allergy. But when it comes to, okay, I mean that one, it's got have me thinking, right? It's
It's very gray. And that's
yeah.
the problem with all of these labels. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people get fixated on the label. And it's not. What it comes down to is if food and exercise are controlling your life rather
Mm-hmm.
than you controlling them, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a balance, and we all fight that balance.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so give yourself some grace around all of these, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not good or bad. It's all about being in the gray, like you
Right.
just said, all
Yeah.
about being in the gray.
Yeah, I mean that's that. Let's talk about, right. Let's talk about now the signs of eating disorders. Right? What?
Yes, the signs. Okay, so we have a few. We have the mental signs. So if you, we'll start with that. You're going to start to see your loved one withdraw from things. Their clarity around certain, they have a hard time forming thoughts. I mean, you think when you are depriving the brain of nutritional value, of nutrients, um, you really have trouble forming complete sentences, complete thoughts, and you start to see this in your loved ones. Um, they withdraw from things that they love. So, activities that they used to be a part of, anything social, they start to isolate themselves more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you just sort of start to see the life drain out of them.
Mm.
Um, and we're that's usually the first. I mean, I know the teenage years, your
Mm-hmm.
kids are going like this anyways, right? Um, but you really start to just see your kid, your loved one, you just, the life just kind of starts to drain.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just not fully there.
Yeah,
So
and it is so it is. I don't want to call it interesting, but for lack of a better word, right? Interesting how it is like I don't want to say like any other, but everything that you're explaining and the withdrawal and the isolation is like another mental trauma or mental disease. It is like it, right? It's like because
yeah, well, and you're typically dual diagnosed. So for me, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, depression, and anxiety.
mm,
So you typically, they kind of all come hand in hand.
Got it.
Honestly.
Okay. Okay.
And who knows the cart or the egg before the chicken? I don't know how that saying. I'm not good with those sayings. One of them comes first.
Who came first, the chicken or the egg? I think what? No, what came first? What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, all eating disorders, this is a belief. They come with a dual diagnosis because you can't. It's very hard to have one without the other. Okay. You don't see a happy person with an eating disorder, like
it makes sense.
Yes. So, and you're right. So right off the bat, you might not think eating disorder. You might think, hey, my kid's depressed. My loved one is anxious, like that. And that is spot on. You're right. But then when you start to add in the other two areas, then you can start to peel back and say, okay, there might be something more here. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Physical.
Yeah. So physical, like I said, you can see extreme weight loss. You can see extreme weight gain, or you see nothing. You can see differences in their skin. So when somebody loses a lot of weight, they'll start to lose color in their skin. Like I said, with the binge eating or the bulimia, you start to get calluses on your hands from throwing up. You have bloodshot eyes from throwing up. You will notice a change in what they start to wear. Typically want to cover up their bodies more. And it could be because the weight loss and they're actually cold because they don't have enough fat on their body. So they tend to wear a lot of layers, or it's because they're really trying to shield themselves. You see eating disorders with abuse, specifically with sexual abuse, people try and hide themselves. It's like a layer of coverage. And so you'll see them start to gear up more. They'll wear more clothes. They might wear a blanket around the house. I used to do that. It's just it's an extra layer of protection. So physically they're going to be more tired. They're going to be exhausted. You think about what they're doing with their bodies. So they're going to be sleeping more. So that's another big sign. And so I don't take weight loss and weight gain into being the biggest factor. There are other physical factors that are major red flags. But yeah, there's typically a fluctuation in weight. Like if they gain and lose 10 pounds within a week, like if you can tell they're gaining and losing, their body's in the fluctuation process.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, how is that for someone who's going through it, where when we get complimented when we lose weight, right?
Yes.
So it's like, oh yeah, let's tell me, oh yeah, well, you look great.
You look so good.
Oh my God, look at you, your hair, your skin, your all of that, right? But then inside, that person might have been like, I went through hell. So, and then it's reinforcing more like, this is what I should be doing. I should be doing all of that, the bad behaviors or whatever, the non-safe behavior. Yeah. I should continue to do that because I get rewarded by doing that.
Right. And that's a big, okay. So you made a comment earlier on that I meant to say something too. We all want to be thin, right? You said that. We all want to have big booties. We all want, depending on whatever society is throwing at us, that's how we want to look. But why? Okay? Why? And really what it comes down to, validation. It comes down to being seen. It comes down to being enough, being loved, being accepted, all of those things, right? So when someone sees you for losing weight, it feeds that part of you that has been wanting to be fed. So it turns the eating disorder up even higher. It says, first of all, I wasn't good enough the way I was, right? Because I'm getting attention now. So obviously I look good now. So now I got to stay this way.
Right.
So now the pressure is on. And we do that without even noticing in our society. And so that's we have to stop commenting on weight across the board.
I agree.
People lose, people gain, stop.
Yeah.
Comment on their smile, comment on what I don't care. I don't care what else you comment on, but weight needs to be taken
I
off the
agree.
board.
I agree. Because it's like, it's exactly what you just mentioned. It's like, okay, I have to stay at this looking like this. And for example, okay, so somebody saw me looking like this and they complimented my weight, because that's what they did, right? They complimented my weight and the way I look because I
Yep.
lost weight. And so I gained weight within the next 5 months and then I have to see them again, right? Do you know the mental stress that goes through it to see that person again? So that, it's, I agree with
It's
you. That should
crazy.
be just, that
Hmm.
should stop. It should stop. It should just
It's just,
be,
we don't comment on height. We don't say, "Oh, you
right.
look
Ooh,
taller
you look
today.
taller
You look
today.
taller." It's like, why is my self-worth directly tied to my weight?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? And so, yeah, that's what we got to stop doing. And we do it honestly with our kids. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where we start. Stop commenting on how our kids look and
Mm-hmm.
what they're weighing or what they weigh and like, we just stop. We
Mm-hmm.
just stop. Um, because yeah, it feeds an eating disorder
Oh my
like
gosh.
no other.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it just starts like one step at a time. What you're doing, Tracy, is amazing. All the awareness that you're creating around safe space is, I tell you all the time, I'm like, I'm so proud of you for everything that you're doing for us here in the community, for in educating, parents, so that then parents can educate their children, because their children are going to be the ones going next, right? And we don't want them having
Absolutely.
eating disorders. We want them being confident enough in themselves that they can find answers within themselves, and they can be confident enough and trust their parents, because their parents have allowed that environment, right? They have grown up with that environment. So if anything happens related to mental stuff, they can come and talk and ask for help, right? Hey, you know what?
Safe
I
space.
actually
Yeah.
not feeling good. I need to see somebody, right? Have that space enough that they can actually verbalize, I need help.
Yeah, I agree. And even if they can't speak it,
Mm-hmm.
give them a chance to write it. Give them a chance to get it out. So that's what, personally, within my own life, I have to communicate with some people that I see through notebook because it's just too difficult for them to say the words, which is
Mm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
It's safer to write it down and communicate through letters. And so as you start to open that door of communication up with your child or with your loved one, if it's the only way that they can get their feelings out, then that's okay. That's okay. But I'm glad you brought that up because
Yeah.
we don't know any better
Mm-hmm.
until we're taught different,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's now on us to teach our kids different than
Mm-hmm.
what we grew up learning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I know you're big on journaling, because on the next segment that we're
I
gonna have, which is
am.
about about coping skills and things, you're huge about journaling. And my kids, when they have to express feelings, most of the times they write me a note and then they send it to me. So I have all
Love
those
it.
notes. I have all those notes from them,
Good for
and then
you.
right, and then sometimes for me, I like you say, it's easier to express your feelings on paper, because there is not this. You're not seeing, like, how when people are trying to listen to you, they're kind of listening to you to respond, and they're really not listening to you. So in a
Yeah.
letter, they have no other choice but to read it, and you
We,
will know if they read it or not when they come back to you
I,
and talk to you about it, right?
I,
So I had a person I used to write letters to, because it was hard for me to communicate with him, but he did not allow me to do that. He would be like, I don't want to read anything. I want you to talk to me. And I'll be like, well, that's not the way I want to communicate right now. Can we make an agreement? It's like, I write,
meet
you
me halfway
speak.
here.
Right, exactly. But writing, I agree, is a great coping skills, and that leads us to the next, right? The next one, coping skills. Here we
Yeah,
go.
coping skills. Okay, so how do we even start this, right? So this is not extreme cases. Extreme cases for eating disorders need medical intervention. Because what's happening is the brain is not going to start to function and you cannot start to heal the body until the brain is working. And so you need nutrition for that. So there is this piece of eating disorder recovery, which is all about the food. and just getting the brain working again. And so you need to gauge where your loved one is. And if their eating disorder has gotten to a point where they cannot keep it in check on their own or with your support, then they absolutely need medical intervention. This is the highest psychiatric like death when it comes to, we lose, I think it's every 26 seconds we lose somebody to an eating disorder. So this is not something to test anyone with your, so please, I know we've talked very like in the gray about this, but it's very dangerous, very dangerous. And so yes, so let's talk coping. This is when you know that food or exercise play a role in your emotions. They play a role in your day-to-day life, and you're like, hey, I want to figure out how to get a little bit more control around this. So how do we stop a cycle that we're in? And for me, it's about bringing it back to the body. So what I have to do is when I get triggered, when I know that food is becoming a focus, exercise is becoming a focus, or any of those things start to come back up, I stop, I connect to my breath, I take 3 deep breaths into my belly, and then I sit down and I identify 3 different areas. So my first thought is, what am I feeling? And I literally printed out a feelings wheel, because for most of us, we've got like 4 emotions, right? I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm excited,
Yeah.
right?
When you mentioned the feelings wheel, I'm like, you know what? I want to get one like that, because it is true. Sometimes there is a feeling that we're feeling that is not, I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling angry. Actually, not. I'm not frustrated. I'm not sad. I'm actually like, but that has a name, right?
That's the name.
So, do you have the wheel? I forgot to ask you. Do you have it
I
with
do
you
have a wheel.
right now?
I meant to print it off. Yeah. It's on my computer. It's yeah, there's like there's like 50 different emotions. Over 50. So what I literally do is I check the feelings wheel and I identify the feeling. I am feeling annoyed. Okay. So why am I annoyed? What happened that is making me feel annoyed? So then I go back. We call that the trigger. So what triggered you to feel annoyed? Okay, I didn't get an email response that I wanted. Something like that. And it caused me to be annoyed, and I'm having this reaction. So I literally write that down. I write down the feeling, what triggered my feeling, and then I go into my body and say, where am I feeling it? Am I feeling it in my chest? Am I feeling it up my back? Am I feeling it in my belly? Am I feeling it in my jaw? Like, where do I feel this emotion? That work is a completely independent assignment. The way I feel frustration is not the way you feel frustration. So you can't look for other people to give you the answers in this.
Right.
You literally have to retrain yourself to go back into your body, which most of us have been so disconnected from our bodies since childhood. Typically this takes place, that we couldn't tell you where we feel things, because we go right here. We go right up to our brain to identify it, instead of actually finding it in our body.
Yeah. And let me ask you a question, Tracy. Why is this so important to identify the part of the body we're feeling that?
Ooh, because that's where we store it. That's where we store it.
Okay.
And then we know now, going back, so instead of responding with food, instead of responding with exercise, we now know the next time I feel that, okay, that's anger. I can feel it in my chest, and then you're able to identify the emotion more.
Okay.
But if you want to get like deeper into that, usually when you're triggered by something, it's something, so anger, we hold on to that stuff from early on, right? Like the first time we wanted to explode as a 5-year-old and we were told, no, quiet down, right? We hold on to that anger. We're like, okay, I really want to explode, but mom's telling me I can't explode, right? So we start to disconnect from what we're feeling in our bodies, and we say, mom's saying this is wrong, so I'm going to ignore what I'm feeling inside my body. And then that cycle continues until we get older, and at some point we are completely disconnected from our feelings. That the way we cope is we use food, we use alcohol, we use sex, we use anything that blankets under the addiction to deal with those feelings. So to heal, you've got to learn how to go back there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's work, right? It's not a pill.
It's so much work.
It's not,
so much work.
right? It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. Coming right from
so
you, right? Coming from me, it is so worth it. And there's some times as we're going through the recovery, as we're going through our healings, where sometimes we have to avoid certain humans because they are the ones who trigger us. And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to ignore those humans until you get a hang on and hold of that emotion, especially if it is a close one, a close family member that you have to absolutely interact with, because then that's...
Yes, but you can set boundaries around that, right? So if there's a certain uncle or your brother, whomever it may be that you have to spend time around, right? But they trigger you and they're not good for your eating disorder and they're not good for your recovery. So what I had to do in my own recovery is I had to set like time frames. So I knew I had to go do this and I knew this was going to be hard, but I made a promise to myself that I was only going to be there for 1 hour and then I was going to leave, and I was going to support myself before and I was going to support myself after. And so there are ways of still being in the environment, but taking back some of that control. But yeah, to heal, it's a people place, or it's a people, place, and thing sort of change. You have to look at all of those factors and how they play into your eating disorder.
I mean, like, I'm from the Dominican Republic, right? In the Dominican Republic, there's a standard for body types. There's the standard for body types. And the standard of, for example, my body type is not a typical body type for Dominicans, right? So I grew up with a lot of people going, I wonder when you're going to grow this. I wonder if you're going to grow this. But the interesting thing about the whole thing is that inside of me, I would say, but I like the way my body looks. Why are they doing this? Why are they telling me all these things? I would hear comments from close family members who would say, oh, don't worry about it. It will happen. I'm like,
really?
Yeah, like it would happen. But the thing that I feel for me that got me not having, I want to say a disorder, right? Or like for extended period of time was that I was happy with the body I had, right? So I actually knew. And then I had other family members who would be like, don't listen to them. They were great supporters, right? They were great cheerleaders. So it's great to have that. But other people who don't, right? That is where it starts. It starts with a simple comment to a child, right? Simple comment to a child coming from someone whom they respect. They believe it.
It takes. Yeah, because they're the adult and you're looking up to them, right?
Yep.
So they're right and you must be wrong.
Right.
And so at some point when that's pushed enough, you're like, okay, I got to believe them, which means that where our core wounds fall is I'm not enough in who I am, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of eating, we think of trauma as like this big experience that something happened, right? We think rape, we think violence, we think, and that is trauma. But trauma is also somebody commenting on your weight over and over and over again, right? So
subtle things. Oh yeah, it's okay. Like harmless. Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. Well, actually, you did. You know what I mean? Like it's like owning like, yes, you did. And then afterwards, just yourself, just being, it's all about coming back to not needing validation, which takes time. It takes time because of the way our society is, right? Sometimes we need that validation. We think we need the validation, right? But the validation is in us. Of course, if somebody comments on, well, your hair looks good, we feel good. It's a compliment, right? It just plays up on the dopamine and all this stuff. So we're like, woo, right? So like we're over there looking for that. But when it's a constant thing that we need that validation to feel good about ourselves, that's when it all taps into, other areas.
Yes, your worth. I mean, and that's social media. Let's be
Oh,
honest.
Jesus
Like,
Lord, for real.
that is what all of your social media stars, that is their worth is off of their looks, off of their body, and we feed that. We feed that now. So the problem that we're seeing is we have children now growing up in that society, and we're saying that's okay. So, it's something that we're going to have to address really soon, or it worries me. It worries me. I mean, I had enough pressure I felt as just a girl growing up in the 80s. Like, I can't imagine the pressure that they feel now.
Yeah. I mean, I just last night, I don't remember the name of the show, but I was watching a show of someone having, surgery and dying and all these things just to be like so-and-so, just to be like, Instagram model, or just to be like, and there's so many things in our society that is like starting at home. We start at home with our children. We start giving them those, even though we think that they might not listen to it, right? But just like any other comment that is made to them, they hear it. It goes through.
Absolutely.
They listen to it. So right? If you think that, if you think that your children are not listening, they are. They listen to everything. They listen to everything. They look at you. They look at you the way you dress. They look at the way you are dressed. They look at the way you handle things in life. And that's where they're learning all of that, right? That's where they're learning everything. And then they compare it to something else.
Yeah. They're trying to find their way, right? So they look at us in terms of how we deal with food, how we deal with exercise, the terminology we put around it, right? And so that's why they say, heal yourself so you can heal your kids, right? Because if you are dealing with a disordered way of looking at food, that's then getting passed down to your kid.
Yeah.
So this is not the easy road. It is not. But once you start to open your eyes around what's happening, it's really hard to look away.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. I mean, my eating disorder started at 8, and I've been now in recovery for 6 years, but I was full blown for about 20 something years. I'm not going to do the math, but, and it controlled every waking moment of my life, every waking moment, every decision. And it was that lost in that cycle. And so if there are a few things like we've talked about a lot, but, if eating disorders are not about food. They are not about body. They are all about the internal pain that you're trying to control. And so if anything, when you're dealing with a loved one, you're going to have frustration. You're going to have a lot of emotions that come up. They're hard to understand. They're, when you're not in the shoes, when you're not experiencing it, they're very hard to wrap your mind around. So I said yesterday, it's just as important to deal with your own mental health as it is for the loved one who's struggling, because this is a process. This is a process. There's no finish line.
It is a step, literally, step at a time, minute by minute, second by second. Is because it's emotions. The emotions come in. And if the only way that we have to deal with these emotions is food, I mean, it's constant. It's the entire day, for example. So it's like making these decisions is like, okay, so I have my coping skills, right? I have this. Where am I feeling? So we just went through where am I feeling this emotion so that later on, now I learn with you here, right? So that later on, when you're feeling that in your heart, or will feel that in your shoulder, or you feel that in your stomach, you'll be like, oh, this is that. Right? This is that. And if it comes accompanied by the same symptoms, you're like, okay, for sure, this is that. If something else, comes through, you're like, okay, let me analyze that again. Right?
Yes.
But
All
yeah.
detective work.
But like
Yes.
giving you an example, when I was I love social drinking. Social drinking, I love social drinking. I'm like, yes, social
Yeah.
drinking, right? But it makes me tired. It makes me tired. I
Mhm.
can't, and I cannot stand being tired, right? Like, like being tired at a party. I mean,
Same.
come on, right? So it is like, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to, when I go out, I have to find a super fun drink that I can have, right? Because let's talk about this for a minute, right? People, when you go and people say, "What would you like to drink?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm not drinking." You're not drinking? Oh my god, right? So it's like,
Uh,
I'm like, okay.
Whole nother show right there.
Exactly. So I'm
Yeah.
like, do I say I'm on antibiotics? But no, because it will be like, what's wrong with you, right? So
Right.
it's like you
Right.
start thinking how you're gonna, and that's the same thing with eating disorders. You come with a whole bunch of questions and answers to be able to go step out of your of the zone, right? And
Hmm.
it is, and
Absolutely.
every minute it happens. So, but it's worth it. It's worth it because, for
It's so
example,
worth it.
for me now, I haven't drank. I haven't drank. I'm like so happy, right? Because I found a ginger beer. It tastes so good, right? Ginger beer, non-alcoholic. So now I'm drinking it and I'm enjoying it because it tastes really good,
Yay.
and I'm
Feeling
not getting
social?
tired. Right?
Yes.
So I'm
I
like,
love
yes,
that.
so that's what it is. You find that which just, is obviously when it's deep in eating disorders, is not going to happen that simple, but it is the same principle, finding ways to
Yes.
cope with it, right? So we were there, right? We were in coping, weren't we? What were we doing?
Yeah, where were we? We've
We
been
were,
all
right?
over.
We're over here. And
Okay. So
again,
identifying the emotions. Yes.
exactly. And again, if you guys have any questions for us or any comments, please feel free to write it in the comments as we go through it. So we have this. We're almost done, and we haven't even created a list. But here we go. We're talking about
Okay. Um, yes. So where you feel it in your body, we talked about that. That's a big one. And what triggered the feeling. So what situation
so
caused
we
that?
covered,
Because
yeah, we
all of
covered.
this stuff, yeah, but you're learning. These are all things we have to start to treat emotions like this. First of all, they're all personal, right? So what affects me is not going to affect you the same
Hmm.
way. So, and they're temporary, but they're teaching us something. So when an emotion comes up that causes anger inside of me, it's teaching me that, oh, somebody's stepping over a boundary, or somebody said something that I disagree with, or somebody is doing something that I don't think is right. But it's telling me something about myself. And that's going to be different from you. And that's going to be different from the guy down the street. And that's okay. That's what makes us unique and different. But we've gotten so used to ignoring those emotions, or bypassing them or numbing them out.
Hmm.
But they actually tell you like cool stuff about yourself.
Right. I mean,
You
there's
just gotta,
a whole bunch of data sent to
yes.
you. Like, okay, I get it, right? And those
Hmm.
are the things. So analyzing that and stopping and listening to it. But it's like the thing. That's the thing. Like we don't stop. Like some of us, right, don't
No,
stop.
we don't
We
stop.
don't. We actually don't want to stop because we don't want to sit on that emotion, because like we
Yes.
were when we were
Yes.
little, which is what you just mentioned, they'll be like, no, what are you feeling that way? You're not supposed to be feeling that way. What do you have to worry about? Just go play, right? Or something like that.
Right. 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 Not validated, right?
Not at
We're
all.
like, oh, but you're right. We will sit and hold a, a wall squat for 3 minutes and be in excruciating pain,
Right.
right? Yet to sit with our emotions,
No
no,
way.
like
Right. No way.
tapping out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's literally retraining your brain and retraining your body
Yeah.
how to do something hard.
Yeah.
But it gets
And
easier. It gets easier.
it does get easier. It gets easier by, therapy, by reaching out to close friends, by watching workshops like this one's, right? By like get a journal that you like love. Tracy's huge on journals. I love journaling as well. I have a whole bunch of notebooks, and just write it down, because then afterwards you go back and you look into it and you're like, wow, like
and just getting it out of here onto paper. And then you look at it and you're like, wow, really? I believe that? Like, it's just getting it onto paper. I don't know what the transition, why it's such a big deal, but we get so lost in our heads. And we play in there all day long and we make stuff up and we run away with ideas. And when you put it on paper in front of you, you're like, wow, okay. That's not right, Tracy. You went a little extreme with that.
And that's what it is, because they say there's not absolute truth. There's no absolute truth. What you believed yesterday could be proven, by yourself, not true today. But because you're like in your mind, you're like, yeah, that's true, and you write it down, and you're like, actually, no.
Actually, I was a little angry. Yes,
right, exactly.
A little angry.
And that's usually, but that can only be seen either by you talking about it or by writing it down.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes I think it was you and I that were talking about this. Sometimes we write something and we're like, oh my gosh, if someone reads this, they're gonna think that I'm crazy. They're gonna think all this. You just take that and you burn it or you rip it, but it's out. Absolutely. It got out of your mind, right? And you saw it in paper and you saw that the thoughts came out. It's just the best when they're out.
It's so good.
Oh my gosh.
It's out. And then you stop perseverating on it. Then you stop overthinking it. It is out. It is done. We are moving forward. But that process of getting it out is so key. Or we just loop it. We just loop it and we continue.
And the mind is amazing at what it does. The mind is amazing at creating things and worlds that are not even real. And we cannot. We have to get it. We have to get it out of there. But okay, so we're going right here. We're done covering this. So now we talked about a list. Right? So talk about a sample list that we're going to make to kind of deal with this. But I wanted to quickly address you, my beautiful viewers. Thank you so much for being here. And remember that if you would like to be a guest on our show, you can send us an email at officiallyunofficialtv@gmail.com, officiallyunofficialtv@gmail.com, and let us know the area on mental health, your expertise in the mental health field, so that we can consider you as a guest. Right? Also, if you would like to support Officially Unofficial TV or be a sponsor for any of our episodes, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Anna Gill. Okay, so now, Tracy, we're going back to you and talking about that.
Okay.
That list. This is your sample list, right?
No, this is my list. Yeah. So, and this is going to be unique to everybody. So instead of using food, instead of using alcohol, instead of using exercise, whatever your go-to is, right? You have to find something to replace that gives a similar feeling. So right off the bat, it's not going to work as well. Okay. As soon as, especially transitioning from an eating disorder, nothing feels as good as my eating disorder. Okay. But I also know my eating disorder is bad for me. So these other options, they work. You just have to do them long enough and retrain the brain to find comfort and to find a way of coping through these skills rather than the eating disorder. Because remember, at some point, it is a habit that you have to break. So for me, once I identify the emotion, sadness, I am sad. Then I figure out ways how to cope with sadness, right? So usually it's crying. Cry, girl. I gotta cry. I'm a crier.
Listen, no, for real. Let's be serious here, right? Crying is the biggest release
It is the
ever.
best.
It's
The
just,
best.
and then I don't know if it happens to you, Tracy, or to you, right? Or to you, guys, if you're, have seen your daughter or your wife or your significant other cry, and then afterwards, they're fine. It is true. They're not crazy. That is exactly what
Switch.
happens. It is a
Yeah.
switch. You release, you cry. And even me, after I'm done crying, I'm like, well, that was fun. And then I started cracking up. I'm like, yes, I did. I mean, it works. I just
It,
saying,
it
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 works.
is an emotion. We talked about this before, right? The wave of an emotion is no longer than 90 seconds. You got to feel it, you got to stay with it and ride it to the other side. And that's what happens when you cry. You get it out and then you're good.
Yes.
So yeah, typically it's crying or journaling. I'm always a journal girl, but yeah, cry.
Oh, I love
Other
this
ways,
one.
sadness. I hug my kids. I love on my kids. So I want comfort, right? So one of those things is just loving on the kiddos, or my dog.
Yeah,
Those are,
I
my
bet you.
big
I
two.
bet you the dog will always let you hug them or them. But
Yeah.
kids, sometimes kids is like, if they're little, they're like all about cuddles, right? But after they go, for example, I have to beg my teenager. I'm like, can I just like give you a hug, like a little one, like a
Give me
little,
one.
right? And then I can go also like, can I just like touch your forehead, maybe like just like get the forehead, and then like, and then I mean like it makes him laugh, but he does it. He's like, well, maybe I can give you a high five, and I'm like, okay. But then there are other times when they come for the hugs, and I'm like, oh my god, stay here for a minute so that I can remember this emotion next time I'm gonna hug them, and I have, and I'm in a, because we have our
Yeah,
crisis list, right? We have a list that we're like, okay, let me go to that list and see what I can do from here. And
absolutely.
you save those feelings, and yeah.
You do. You do. I love that.
Let's go back to this list. Okay, so you have your dog, lucky you. Well,
I
yeah.
love my dog. I do. I love on my dog. Yeah, anger. So this is a big one for me too. And for a lot of women, we have a lot of anger that because we weren't allowed to express the ugly quote unquote emotions as much as children,
Mm-hmm.
because we're girls, right? And I'm not this. I know somebody's probably going to yell at me for saying that, but it was true, right? Girls, we're supposed to look and act a certain way, so we got this fire in us sometimes, and so yeah, anger is like a. So I scream, and sometimes I literally throw a tantrum. Like I say to my kids, listen, mom is literally going to throw a tantrum right now. Like I'm going to warn you because it's going to get ugly in there. And they look at me like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, it's getting out, right? I'm not using my eating disorder. It's getting out. I might be
Mm-hmm.
on the floor. Screaming, but
Like, no,
whatever.
you could be to your kids like, I learned it from you.
Is this how we act? Is this pretty sure I saw you do this yesterday. So who says I can't do it?
But it's whatever works for real. Like,
Whatever works.
I throw tantrums where like I don't get on the floor. I just ah.
Ah,
Yeah, and it's true. Like women, we have this anger because we have to, be
we
like,
cap things. We
right,
cap things.
exactly,
We
right.
filter.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
No, just go and let it out. Just go and let
Yeah.
that thing out. Like, yeah, the fluffy pillows work really well
Oh,
because you
they
can just
do.
they like get fluffy, and then you can scream in them, and it's not too, it gets buffered.
Love it.
Okay, so
Love
here
it.
we go. All right, so the next
All
one
right.
is
Oh, tired. This is a big thing for me. Tired. Because I want to pretend that I can stay up with the rest of society and not stop going, but I can't. Like I lose steam so quick. And so taking a nap, the power nap is always a good one for me. Get outside. Nature like regenerates me. Breathing. I do some breath work or taking a bath. That's always like a form of comfort. But you got to get creative. You're going to do some
mm-hmm.
trial and error. See what
Yeah,
works for you.
yeah, definitely.
Um, Frustrated. Same with angry. You just got to get it out, and it's going to be ugly. It's gonna be ugly. Let it be ugly. It's supposed to be. It's
Yep.
supposed to be.
It's supposed to be ugly. It's like it's supposed to be ugly. Just don't let anybody see you. It's in the
Yeah.
private. It's I mean
Just do it
just
behind closed doors and don't let the
exactly.
neighbors hear.
That's it. Behind closed, just do your thing and then come out feeling balanced and all of that good stuff. But I mean, like we're actually like kind of like making light of this, but it is true. It is true, and it does work for different things. It is not. It's not only today we're talking about eating disorders, but it can also work to regulate your emotions. Whatever emotions you're feeling, trying any of these coping skills will help you regulate your emotions. Because if you're feeling anger and you just hold it in, and then let's say for example that your anger you hold it say in your shoulders, you're gonna be not only are you gonna be angry, but you're gonna be in pain
Right.
because you're holding it in your shoulders. So letting go of that anger is going to help your shoulders. It's going to help you release. It's going to relax you. So if that doesn't work for you, that's where you can, like as Tracy said, you can get creative and try different things,
Hmm.
right? Different things
You
for
can
you. So
try different
whatever,
things.
right? So whatever it looks like for you, create that list of when you get angry. We're not even talking we have addressed this to women, but we see a lot of gentlemen in the audience. Hi you guys, thank you so much for being here. And also for gentlemen, you can also create your list of for regulated emotions, and this is also great for helping out your significant other or perhaps you yourself. So yes, thank you so
And
much for being here.
yeah, guys are a whole nother realm because they're taught not to express those emotions, right? So, um, you guys have more up against you right now because now we're saying we want you to do that though. Like we
Mm-hmm.
want to hear that from you as a partner, as a coworker, as your neighbor. Like so, what typically happens is we see explosive anger, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
we see this onset of emotions that seems to come out of nowhere, and it's because there's the buildup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And little
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden causes an explosion, or like you said, you carry it in your shoulders, or you
Right.
start to have knee pain, or it's all held in our body. It's energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's energy. So when we're not releasing it, when we're not releasing it through our words or through our tears or somehow, it builds up and then it eventually comes out, and it comes out usually in some sort of an explosive manner. And that is where the eating disorder comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
Binging and purging, it's an explosive manner.
Oof.
Purging
Yeah.
is explosive, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that was my way of expressing anger, right?
Mm.
So it's actually kind of smart because it's in a maladaptive way
Mm-hmm.
expressing emotions, but it's temporary.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
very
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not sustainable. Your body's not going to
no,
sustain that
no.
at all. And it affects your life. It affects everything. So it's really not sustainable. But but we have covered here what the eating disorders are, why they happen, and we have taught you coping skills with it, and we have show you a sample list that you can perhaps take out from or create your own list so that you can to learn how to recover and heal from it. Again, like as Tracy mentioned, if it's an extreme, right, extreme cases, you need to medical intervention. But say,
Mm-hmm.
Tracy, let's say someone who, how will we determine that line, right? Like how?
Yeah. Yeah. When it starts to control you, when it starts to control your life. And it might not be that you need a residential treatment program. It might be that you need a therapist. It might be that you need to go see a nutritionist. It might be that you just need to go to the doctor and ask for help.
Mm,
Um, so it's going to look different for everybody, regardless on where they are, you
mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
But there is help out there, and um, it's we have a bunch of resources on the Safe Space CNY
Oh, speaking
website.
of, look at this.
Speaking of,
Hey, speaking of.
um, but there are resources here locally and um, online for people that would rather do it online for sure. But really just making the decision yourself to be like, I'm ready to kind of get a hold on this, to take control, uh, is the first big step. Is the first big step.
Yeah, and there is your Instagram. You are super active on Instagram. I love all the content that you put there on
Mm,
Instagram. So feel free, everybody, to
thank you.
follow Tracy here. And of course, look at this. Who's this? Wait, this is supposed to be my profile, and I just see pizza, right? So let's go here. This is my profile. It's
Looks
officially
really
unofficial
good.
TV on Instagram. Follow us.
Aw.
Look at who's there. Who's there?
Oh, yeah,
Aw,
that's me.
yes.
That's me.
So that's our information. So follow us. We come live every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern
Love it.
Standard Time, right? So next week we're going to be talking production actually. So all of this that you see here, right? So Tracy was like, "Oh, I don't have a fancy camera like you," and things like that. So guess what, right? You can learn how to do things. We're gonna just talk simple stuff because we are going to be attending social media marketing world, which is in March, right? So it's going to be great. So we are actually going to be broadcasting live from there, and we are taking down the studio and testing out a couple of cameras that we're taking, and we're actually going to show that to you guys, everything that we're doing, and that is next Thursday at 1 p.m. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome.
And then Tracy, you can stay tuned for that too, so you
I
can
would love to. I need the help. Wait,
right?
1984 computer at no. Yeah, use the help.
You look good. You look good. So, all right. So, Tracy, any last minutes thoughts before we close?
Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle. Be kind. You deserve it. This is not. There is no finish line to this. Every day we learn something new, and we try and apply it to the next. So be gentle, but know the warning signs. Don't be afraid to approach or bring this up with your loved one. And I'm grateful to be here. So thank you for having me on again.
Yes, of course. I'll have it. I love having you here, especially the contents
Aw.
that that put out all the help and how willing you are to help us all out in the mental health field. That is great. So I appreciate you so much. So everybody, thank you so much for being here. My name is Ana Gil, officially unofficial TV. We'll be seeing you next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we take down and test a couple of equipment that we're going to be bringing out to social media marketing world. And if you are going to be a social media marketing world, let us know in the comments so we can look you up there. Okay, so everybody, thank you so much. We will see you next Thursday. Have a great Thursday and weekend. Bye.